Anybody want to learn about bees today? Okay. You can tell I'm dressed for the occasion. I've actually become a farmer now. I have a 30-year sales career in structural steel sales, and I took a left about 8 years ago to get into some honeybees. I had propagated a strawberry and went down to the back 40. My wife and I live in Redmond Ridge on 6 acres overlooking Oxbow Farms, and I continued to propagate these strawberries in a 10 by 8 strawberry patch. And I brushed my hands off and was walking up the hill, and there was a black-tailed deer doe standing dead center of these strawberries and looking at me. So this was all a plan from nature. And I said, don't do it. And as she's looking at me, she reaches down and she grabs a strawberry and pulls it up, and the roots are dangling. And I said, that's not for you. So I proceeded to call BMC Lumber, one of my sales reps, and ordered a pallet of concrete and what I thought was a large lumber package, and continued to build a 20 by 40 foot structure with welded wire fabric that they use in commercial slabs, and built custom doors and really protected this strawberry patch. And as I was doing that, I came up with the idea that I was going to go get some fruit trees. So I went to Flower World. I got 2 truckloads of fruit trees, 8 different types of raspberries, 8 different types of blueberries, a strawberry, a pear tree, a peach tree, a hybrid apple tree, and way overplanted this 20 by 40 foot structure. And then I cracked a sparkling water, and I was sitting there admiring my work, and I said, oh my goodness, who's going to pollinate this? I read the news. There's no bees. All the bees are dying. So I took a beekeeping class at Snohomish Beekeeping. And it was a very basic class. This is a honeybee. This is a hive tool. This is a smoker. And I ordered my first package of bees, like many of us do, from the almond pollination in California. It's 10,000 bees and a working queen. And I installed these bees, and I fell in love with them. One day they were drinking green algae off of a mud puddle, and I thought, what is this 120 million-year-old sentient being doing drinking pond scum? So I got online and I ordered some spirulina. Spirulina is seaweed that they've extracted and they grind it up. It tastes terrible. It turns everything green. But on an antioxidant level, blueberries are here, and spirulina is through the roof. And I proceeded to mix it with the pollen supplement that I was feeding my bees. My bee mentor at the time, he said, you were crazy. I fed it to my bees, and they absolutely devoured it, and they exploded in health and wellness. And I thought, So I went and got some Himalayan sea salt, 120 million-year-old pink salt, and I mixed it with 1 gallon of our well water, which is an 8 pH, beautiful well water, and I put it beside a regular gallon of water and the pond water that they were drinking, and I pulled a chair up and I just sat there and I watched. And within 2 hours, all of those bees had migrated over to the Himalayan sea salt water, that micronutrient. And so that's when the lights went off, and from that moment on, I started focusing on their health and wellness and nutritional profile. Those bees propagated, turned to 8 hives, and those all overwintered, which is really unprecedented, especially in the Pacific Northwest. Fast forward to this summer, I was managing 180 hives in 7 locations, and I haven't bought a single bee. So I grafted on my own queens, and that's what I'm going to share with you today, is about being a bee steward versus a beekeeper or a bee haver. I focus on their health and wellness. They share their honey with us. And what I'm going to do is go through some slides here. This is a pretty boring looking slide. This is one of my yards on 124th and Duval in the floodplain. Beside those poplars is the Snoqualmie River. And in December, I had to move all the bees and stack my racks. And you can see the flood came, broke my sign, and stacked up straw on those racks. It was about 5 feet. Well, last week, I thought I was out of the clear, and I had brought the bees back. And so this is what it looked like. It was a lot of work, and I'm getting ready for the big leaf maple flower flow, and I'll share that a little bit more, replace the sign, set up the electrical box so the bears don't get them. And then the next day, and so, this is Mother Nature, right? And so Saturday, I was in a rowboat trying to get to my bees, and my heart was in my throat, and I thought I was going to lose those bees, and I thought I made a terrible mistake. And I did. We had another 100-year flood. It was way bigger than they anticipated. And when it peaked, it sat on Saturday at 11:11. That water was up at the base of those hives. Another few more inches, and I probably would have lost all those hives into the river. So then it started to recede. I was able to go down the road I wasn't supposed to go down and go through some heavy water and get to them. And they're all doing fantastic. This is what they're going to look like in about a month. And so this all started with one beehive, 10,000 bees and one queen. And I color code all the entrances. This is my teaching yard. I do immersion experiences where you can book an appointment on rebel44.com and come out. I'll put jackets on you. We'll go into the bees for 2.5 hours. I graft on my own queens, and my number one trait that I look for isn't how much honey did they build. Check, they overwinter, but the very most important thing that I look for, are they sweet and gentle to work with? Do they have a good democratic society? There's a bird, it's called the Swainson's thrush. It's a dual vocal cord bird. She makes a migration to South America when she comes back, and it's a 1,500-mile migration. When she comes back, she lands high in the treetops at our house at 588 feet, and she lets out this beautiful dual cord reverberation. When I hear that, I hear, AJ, I'm back and it's time. And that is my cue to put the honey supers on for the big leaf maple flower. That is a big leaf maple flower that this area is prolific with big leaf maples. You will never find maple honey, or at least I've yet to find any anywhere, but my bees share a ton of it because I'm listening to the environment. The human calendar is static. That happened to be on 4/4 last year is when I heard that bird. So you know that's right around the corner. That's why I moved my hives back. This is the honey that they make. That's big leaf maple flower honey. That was from April 4th to May 8th last year. So I work co-creatively with these bees to do these what's called hyper-local targeted nectar flows through seasonality of the greater Snoqualmie Valley. It's a mouthful, but I'm able to separate and isolate these honeys in different elevations and terroirs and show the difference of what those little microenvironments do, and it is magnificent. That same bird, the Swainson's thrush, changes to a mating call. Last year it happened to be on May 22nd, and it was the same exact day that the king bud that bee is on, of the Himalayan blackberry bloom. Now that's the first bud that blooms. There's not a lot of nectar on it, but it was both, that Swainson's thrush mating call and that king bud, are both 7 to 9 day indicators that I've got that much time before the Himalayan blackberry goes into full bloom, and that was on June 3rd. And that happened, and this is one of the frames that the bees filled out with Himalayan blackberry honey. An absolutely beautiful frame of honey. Super healthy, super vibrant. I'm going to lose some people here, but that looks like a slab of salmon or almost a warm heart. I put a rose quartz crystal stuffed in that honey super to see what would happen, and I've never seen honey come out that way. So I'm just going to leave it at that, but I do some really interesting things with my bees, and these are the things that they're producing. That is a decanter of some late summer from July 4th to August 15th. It's got blackberry and a few other things in it. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just taking you through a few of the nectars that I've been able to isolate. Where most beekeepers put their honey supers on, they pull them off at the end of the year, they mix it and blend it, and you get that teddy bear that's sweet and thick, and hopefully it's real. Honey, unfortunately, is the third most adulterated food on the planet. Milk is number 1, olive oil is number 2, and it's fighting for number 2 is honey. It's actually number 3 right now. This is the fireweed flower. Fireweed is a rebirthing plant for when there's been a fire or a clear cut. And I saw beekeepers selling fireweed all through town that were colors of the decanters that you already saw, dark amber, light amber. People come to my table in Alaska and they say, I know what fireweed is, and they point at the darkest honey on the table. I came up with an idea, and I took a hive put it in my pickup truck, and I drove to the Snoqualmie Mountains where I know they clear cut. I parked my truck, I put 80,000 bees on my back, and I hiked. And I hiked and I hiked and I hiked, and I got to 1,400 feet. I took those bees off my back and I strapped them to a tree in the middle of black bear country. I opened the entrances and I said, you got 2.5 weeks. Show me what you got. And as I pointed, that pink fuchsia flower as far as the eye could see, I took those bees to a fireweed flow to see what would happen. This is what they gave me. This is pure Pacific Northwest fireweed that is water clear. Nobody's ever seen it. I have 50-year beekeepers that come up to my table and challenge me and question me. Unless there was somebody up there dumping sugar in my honey box up in the middle of the mountains, then that's pure fireweed. And I've been able to do that a couple of times in a row. It is absolutely magnificent. It's been showcased on the Herb Farm restaurant in Woodinville. Chef Chris Weber's the youngest five-diamond chef in the country. We've had the privilege of being the featured farmer 2 years in a row for his 100-mile dinner where they harvest all the food within 100 miles of the chandelier. It's a true privilege to partner with him because he appreciates our stewardship and efforts that we go through to get this honey. The last one that I'm going to show you, this is Japanese knotweed, an invasive plant that everybody hates. Grows along the Snoqualmie River. It loves acidic soil. It loves very bright soil, just like the blackberry. This was from August 22nd to September 21st, and then I intentionally harvested the next day, which was the autumn equinox, and I call it Equinox Dark. They pull that nectar from that flower that everybody hates. So we have an opportunity today to change our perception on the Himalayan blackberry, the Japanese knotweed that we're tearing out of our yards, because the bees do some amazing things with these flowers. They pull that black nectar out of that white little flower. It's a teeny, teeny, tiny white flower. What's really interesting about this nectar is that the NIH, the National Institute of Health, just put out a study on the botany of this plant, and they compared it to Manuka honey with all the man-made Manuka measurements. This has 20 times the antioxidants as all other honey, including Manuka, and it is full of resveratrol. When I'm doing a nectar flight tasting, I can lift the wand of that decanter, and it will be this reddish glow, and that's resveratrol. That's what makes red wine red, and that's that blue zone live forever enzyme. In that study from the National Institute of Health, they were saying things like, this honey is anti-cancer, this honey is anti-aging, it's all antimicrobial, antibacterial. This is the rarest, most medicinal honey, in my opinion, in the world, and it's in our backyard. This is a box that I had busted open. I have 2 boxes on my bees, and there was a shim, and they had built it with comb, and they put a bunch of blackberry honey in it. So when I cracked the box, I had disturbed it all, and they just patiently filled their stomachs and went and hid it somewhere else, and with 5 minutes, that was all gone. This is what my garage looks like that I've kicked my wife's car out of in my own truck, and what this has come to, this is what I call my honey lab, where I extract the honey. I've spent an exorbitant amount of money on infrastructure, trying to do a full-time day job in structural steel sales. So I'm a cancer to the earth on one hand, and then I'm a bee steward on the other hand, trying to balance things out. So that's kind of where I'm at. So this is some blackberry honey that I'm extracting. This is one of my honeybees, and yes, that's a passion flower that I grew at my house. I do bring it in the winter, but it's an exhausted worker bee that's got pollen baskets on, and she's just hanging on by a limb. And yeah, it's a pretty special picture. This next frame is pollen. Now, if I could zoom this in, this is one of the most magnificent frames of pollen I've ever seen. There's literally hundreds of millions of pollen particles on this, where they have gathered pollen from thousands of different flowers. This is the fat and the protein that the bees use to feed their larvae, their babies. So the sugar, the nectar that they get from all those honeys I showed you, that's the energy source, the carbohydrate for the adult bees. This is the fat and the protein for the babies to be grown. Now I'm going to take you through what it looks like to be a little baby and how we graft queens. This is what happens in May when the bees get too packed out and they're swarming. All those little specks, that's about 50,000 bees that decided to take off out of my apiary at my house. And so I patiently wait for them to land in a tree, and if I'm lucky enough, I can climb it and put it in a new home, and that way I can protect them. The swarms that I lose, usually 10% of them live through the first winter, and after that they don't survive. So there's certain traits that these bees need to live up here in the Pacific Northwest, and one is to be mite resistant, Varroa destructor mite, and I'll talk about that in a moment. There's some bees that decided to pose on my sign. I pulled up, and there was about 30,000 bees just hanging. It was probably 50 degrees that morning, so they were kind of cold, waiting for it to warm up. What they do is they send forager bees out and scout bees out to find a new home, and the bees measure it, and then they come back and they do a waggle dance, just like they do when they go and get nectar, and tell them exactly where that new home is, and if they can have a good democratic discussion and there's enough of a vote, they'll all go to that home. I try to break that up and put them in a box before they can do that so that they survive. I don't know if you can see this. This is really interesting. So I graphed on my own queens. And that is, if you can see the lower part here, looks like it's pulsating. That's the life force of a one-day-old larvae that I grafted with a Chinese grafting tool out of one of my hives to make queens. That blue thing that it's in is this big. And the opening is about 3 millimeters where you could probably stick a pencil eraser in. And that whole cavity is where I put that teeny tiny, I mean, you can't even see it with a naked eye. At least I can. I have to use a microscope. So I graft all my queens when I find that hive that's got really sweet genetics and they've all overwintered and they've got a good democratic society, and I usually make 44 of them at a time. And then I split those bees and I'm able to give them new homes, and so they want to propagate. So bees don't care about having more bees in a hive. They want to colonize. That's what they've been doing for 120 million years. This is what it looks like after I've put these larvae into a hive and remove the queen so there's no queen mandibular pheromone. I fill it with copious amounts of nurse bees because they're the ones that make the royal jelly to make a queen bee out of a regular larvae egg. And then I install it into a frame. These are all capped brood that the bees are on top of. You can see some open cells where there's some honey. But this is just a super healthy frame of honeybees. Now that queen will hatch out of there, and in 10 days it will strengthen up and go on a flight. It's called a mating flight. It will go up to 5 miles away and it will mate with 9 to 15 drones in the air. And a drone is a male bee that has no stinger and doesn't collect resources. And in the fall, if you go down and look at your hives, they're getting kicked out by the female guard bees. Sound familiar? And that is a queen that has had a successful mating flight and has made it back when she mates with all those drones. And by the way, when they're having their sex in the air, she flexes her muscles and pulls out his sexual organs, and he falls to his death. So if you see a drone flying around, he's just never mated. So if she makes it back without getting eaten by a swallow or a dragonfly, she's good for typically 5 years. My queens can live up to 5 years. Most beekeepers squish them after a year, and you'll appreciate this. They get a certain age and their pheromone isn't strong enough, and they're not doing this and they're not doing that, so they squish them after a year and replace it with a younger queen. That's not my business to do. I have queens in my apiary that are 4 years old and they're doing fantastic, laying 2,000 to 3,000 eggs a day. If they decide they need a new queen, they'll make a new queen. That's the difference between being a steward and a keeper, in my opinion. This is the Varroa destructor mite. This is the mite that carries pathogens. It came over from Asia about 30 years ago. It just hit Australia. Australia is devastated because they don't know what to do. It's not the mite that kills the bee, but the forager bees will pick up a mite in the environment and bring it back, and that mite will climb down into a developing larvae, and they'll cap it off, and then that bee hatches with all of these mites on it. Now, the mite bites into the lymphatic system of the bee and pulls all the fat bodies for nutrients. It's not the mite that kills the bee, it's the pathogens that the mite carries that kills the bee. Deformed wing virus. So this is a superorganism, and if you have enough mites in there to lay enough pathogen, then you'll have colony collapse or your bees will die and you'll wonder why. So you could have the best resources, the best warm, dry cavity for your bees to go through winter. If they have too many mites, they will die. This is this is my truck set up in the lavender field in Woodinville. My wife is doing a nectar flight tasting. This is how we set up and do it. This is how I recoup my costs of the $500,000 that I've spent on my bees and given them new homes. And my wife said, "What in the hell are you doing?" I said, "I don't know. They just want to grow. I got to keep making new homes for them." So this is what we do. I think we did 70 shows last year in between my day job and working the bees. I do private nectar flight tastings with glass spoons where you could book it online, and I can come to you and we can do a private nectar flight through all seasonality and terroir. I do stewardship immersion classes where kids come out. I've signed a couple contracts with Microsoft where they send their interns out. And I have 36 bee suits, so you would come out and I'll put jackets on you, and we will immerse ourselves into those bees for 2.5 hours, like I stated earlier. You won't need to wear gloves because my bees are sweet. When you hear that 4 million bees flying around you and you hear that C harmonic and that cadence, and then you taste that honey that those bees are foraging for at that moment, there's this hyper-focused click, and I can't explain it, but it is true earth connection and presence. It is beautiful. If somebody's going to ask me what REBEL44 is, when I was a little boy, I grew up in Maine. That's me in 1979 with my little goose. I rescued it from a pond. I was fishing, and it was my first ever unconditional love. He used to sleep under my neck every night. I taught him how to fly. So everywhere I ran, he would fly, and I named him Rebel. So that's where Rebel came from. It's not some tactical assault. REBEL44, it's got actual weight and depth, and if I tell you the 44 part, I'll probably cry, so I'll save that for another time. That's a picture to my doc card that has my all my information on it. My REBEL44, my Instagram. This is a direct Instagram, so here, go ahead and take a picture of that if you'd like. And then this is my Instagram page where I show different events that I'll be at. And I just so happen will be at the zoo, to the zoo it's called. It's in the Spring District. They're going to be the grand opening of the connection. So I'll be there doing a nectar flight from 10 to 3 on Saturday if you'd like to bring any of your family members to come. I'd do a full nectar flight for you now, but I don't have 3 or 4 hours, and I don't think you guys do either. So I've left a little bit of time. Any questions? Oh.
Thanks, AJ. That was fantastic. Back to your very original question. I heard that you said, oh, there aren't any pollinators left. What's going to happen? What's the scoop now? What's the situation?
So last year, I should probably share a little bit about the pollinators and monocropping. So, you know, we have the almond pollination in California, and it's the biggest pollination movement in the world, where beekeepers from all over the world bring 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 beehives, even from the East Coast, and they take it to California in January to pollinate those almonds. If those almonds don't have bees, an acre of almonds will produce 200 pounds of almonds. If they do have honeybees, they'll produce 2,000 pounds. So we've created this propped up monoculture food system, and we demand that the bees be there to help. The unfortunate thing with that is it's a monocrop, so they don't get a full amino acid profile when they have the pollen. And then one day they pick them up, they put them on a truck, and they truck them to Florida to the orange blossom. And then 4 or 5 weeks goes by, and then they pick them up and take them to Maine to the wild blueberries, where they get a little bit of a break because there's not a lot of pesticides up there. They finish them off in Yakima. There's not a dandelion or a clover in Yakima. So these bees are sick, and they're dying, and they get this European foul brood and colony collapse, and everybody wonders what's happening. My bees, I've had multiple requests that I pollinate certain crops, and I won't do it because they're monocrops. My bees have a home. And they're able to, you saw that frame of pollen. It's really important that these bees have a full nutritional profile and are stewarded properly, not treated like slave labor. It's an unfortunate system. It's not the pollinator's fault, but they make about $250 per hive when they take a load of bees down, and if you multiply that by 10,000, I mean, you're talking serious money. So it just becomes a game. When I went to the National Honeybee Expo in Louisville, Kentucky last year, I sat down with several big-time commercial beekeepers, and they're like, how do you do it? How do you keep all your bees alive? And I started naming off all the things, and I got about halfway through, and they just looked at each other and said, if we do that, we'll go bankrupt. We can't run our bees that way. I sure can. That's my Instagram. This has my everything on it, my doc card. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. You know, it's amazing listening to you talk. I can see the passion and really talking about the stewardship. But you said something like twice, almost in passing, that, like, what's he talking about? You talked about hives being democratic. Is that like an aspirational thing that you've got going, or does that make them more productive? Or could you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Thomas Seeley, who's got 50 years in this beekeeping, he's a scientist, and he dedicated his life in the Arnott Forest, climbing trees and cutting natural hives out. He wrote a book called Honeybee Democracy, and it's really a democratic superorganism. And when they swarm and they land in a tree, I've got video. I've got hundreds of hours of video, but you'll see those bees doing the waggle dance. So I'll give you an example. They'll go out and collect some nectar from a flower. Well, you saw a bunch of flowers today. I tried to show you which flower makes which honey, just as a guide to help. They'll come back into this pitch dark hive, into this superorganism with 60, 80,000 bees, and they will pull out their proboscis and let the bees that are going to go forage taste it. And then they state their case. They do a excited waggle dance in a figure 8, and you can actually decipher that. It's an actual language on the distance and the angle to the sun of where that, not that bush is, where that flower was, up to 5 miles away. It's fascinating. This sentient being is so intelligent. I don't think we can even scrape the surface to truly understand how intelligent they are. So everything they do is democratic. There's not a selfish bee in that hive, and we sure could learn a lot from them. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Thank you. You are fabulous. Thank you for coming today.
Oh, my goodness.
What can we, as an individual that doesn't have a hive, do to help? How can we take an action that would support this?
So I think it's really important. I used to be a green grass guy. I liked putting the fertilizer on, having it nice and green, looking like the ninth hole. And now I see dandelions grow, and the grass gets a foot tall, and my neighbors are like, "What are you doing?" And they're actually very kind about it. We try to plant pollinating flowers. I plant a ton of lavender. I just don't use any fertilizers or herbicides or pesticides around the house. You can buy a mason bee box on Amazon. It has little toilet paper rolls. You don't even have to buy the mason bees. I put one in my apiary. I have 6 now because I put one up, and then 6 months later there was this little black fly that started laying eggs, and it's a mason bee. It's a solitary bee, and they will outwork a honeybee 10 to 1. And they come out in the springtime, and they're a low maintenance bee. You can also buy them out of Woodinville in cocoons, but I just put a box up and they found it, and they'll only travel like 250 yards.
One more, back to Eric's point, the Democratic Society, could you give us a thumbnail of the different roles the bees play throughout their lifetime?
Oh boy.
And really thin, I know,
Yeah.
it was fascinating. I wanted
We
you
have
to share.
time?
Yeah, we have 3 minutes. Go
3
ahead.
minutes, okay.
2 minutes.
Any other questions other than this one? Just so
How many times have you stung by bees?
there's never been a time that I've been stung that I didn't deserve it. Okay? A lot. So when a queen lays an egg, it's an egg for 3, it drops, then it becomes a larvae, and it's in this pool of royal jelly. And that royal jelly is made by the nurse bees that were just born. So they come out of their cocoon, they have no idea what's going on, they look kind of fuzzy, they're full size, and then after a few hours they're put into becoming a nurse bee where they're feeding other larvae. They're immediately put to work. That larvae rotates clockwise, and those nurse bees feed that larvae 1,300 times a day. And what they feed them is a concoction of royal jelly and some of that pollen that they've mixed to make bee bread. And bee bread is a fermented pollen mixture. When I do that queen grafting, I take that same egg that would normally become a female bee, and when I put that in a hive that has no queen and there's no queen mandibular pheromone, and I put copious amounts of nurse bees like I stated earlier, they go into overdrive and they feed those larvae a different diet, and they make queens, and that's what those peanut shell queen cells were. So they have the ability to make different bees based on the diet that they give it. Who taught them that? There's nurse bees, there's forager bees, there's undertaker bees. You'll see bees pulling dead bees out. There's I call it Beezillion Jiu-Jitsu on the front entrance when there's what's called a dearth. So you'll have pollen and nectar flows and everybody's happy. When that pollen and nectar dries up, it gets what's called a dearth. And I just remember that by dead earth. There's not a lot of resources, so strong hives will start looking around to see who they can rob. And those guard bees, which are all female, that's why I love these. 90% of them are female. and they know how to run things, and they stand there at the entrance, and bees will come in from some other hive, and they just start fighting, and so there's probably 14 different roles.
Well,
That's it. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. And I really appreciate it. I vote for the bees to run our government. And you're not going to go anywhere. In honor of your presentation, we donated 3/4 ton of fresh produce in your name to Harvest Against Hunger, which is a Rotarian-driven organization that supplies and give food to people that need it. Otherwise, they go waste. And also, as an appreciation of our Rotary, we want to give you a coffee mug that is a representation of one of the projects we did in downtown Bellevue. Thank you very much for your presentation.